Just the family first, Diane said, lifting her phone. We'll get you in after this one. She said it sweet. Lauren was already beside Evan when she said it, close enough to look settled there. Amari, Kendra's daughter, stood in the middle. Kendra was still off to the side with her toad on her shoulder. Nobody corrected a thing. Tasha went rigid. Bernice's face fell clean open. Even Amari stalled, caught between adults acting like something ugly was normal. Diane kept smiling, phone up, waiting. Kendra didn't move. Her face went flat and still. The kind of stillness that takes work. Evan didn't say a word. Lauren stayed where Diane put her, and Diane kept the phone up. The sign-in clipboard was already sliding down the table when Kendra got there. Clinic badge still clipped to her plain work top, tote hanging heavy off one shoulder. Evan was waiting with Lauren beside him, both of them looking settled. Like this was just the normal shape of things now. Holly stood near the volunteer table with her phone in one hand, watching the room and pretending she wasn't. Kendra took the clipboard, signed Amari in, and passed it back without smiling at either of them. When Evan started to say her name, she shifted just enough to turn her shoulder, putting her body toward her daughter and away from that polished little pair. It was small, but everybody felt it. One parent glanced up, then down. Another cut her eyes toward Holly. Evan kept smiling along. Like if he held it there, the awkwardness would belong to Kendra instead of him. Amari stayed close, quiet. Kendra's jaw went tight. She didn't offer warmth, didn't make the moment easier. She just stood there in her work shoes and clinic badge and let their version of easy sit by itself. Lauren leaned in like she could smooth it over. We can just put. Kendra pulled the clipboard back before she finished. Her finger landed on Amari's emergency contact line. No, Thursday aftercare stays the same. If pickup changes, you call me first. The school staffer leaned closer to read it. Holly glanced down too. Evan's smile tightened without leaving his face. Lauren gave a quick, bright laugh. I was only saying, I heard you. Kendra tapped the line once. That's the number. Nobody argued with that because it was sitting right there in black ink. The school still sent the dismissal changes to Kendra. The little last-minute shifts still ran through her phone. Whatever easy picture Evan and Lauren wanted to stand in. Amari's actual day was still rooted through Kendra's memory. Lauren's smile came back to fast. Kendra let the clipboard go and folded her hands, still as a wall, like she was done helping anybody pretend not to know who actually kept the routine straight. Instead of backing off, Lauren stepped closer. One hand landed on Evan's arm like she'd been standing there forever. The volunteer sign-up sheet sat between trays of muffins and a pile of name tags, and Holly started talking about open spots for the fundraiser. Lauren answered before anybody looked at Kendra. We'd love to help. Whatever you need. She said it to the whole parent circle. Bright and breezy, body pressed in at Evan's side. A couple of parents followed her cue right away. Their attention moved where hers wanted it to move. To the couple. To the easy picture. Kendra stayed on the edge with the clipboard. Her mouth twitched once, like something dry and sharp almost got out. But she swallowed it. Lauren kept going, smiling like she was including everybody while quietly taking the center for herself. Sweet on top, claim underneath. And the worst part was how quickly the room let her do it. The folded school flyer stayed under Evan's hand while he leaned in, smiling like he was the calm one in this. Come on, Kendra, he said softly. Let's not make this a thing. We're here for Amari. We can keep it easy. He said it in that reasonable voice of his, like he was offering peace instead of sliding blame across the table. Kendra stood straight, one hand hooked through her toast strap, face blank. No little nod, no quick rescue, no fine to help him sound better than he was. Lauren watched her hard, waiting for some flinch she could read. Holly shuffled the volunteer papers and looked anywhere else. The silence got long, and without Kendra stepping in to soften it, Evan's words stopped sounding kind. They just sat there in the open. Another way to ask her to carry the mood, protect his image, and make his entitlement look harmless in front of everybody. The staffer at the end of the table had been listening whether she meant to or not. She paused over the school roster, looked past Evan and Lauren, and asked Kendra, Amari still does early dismissal through aftercare, right? Not Evan, not the woman hanging off his arm. Kendra answered right away, yes. If anything changes, call me before 2. That was it. Clean. Useful. Certain. The staffer nodded and marked the line. Holly caught that little turn in the room. Evan did too. His smile thinned so fast it almost disappeared. Parents kept shuffling around the sign-in table, talking about pickup times and volunteer slots, but something had changed. When a real question came up, the room had gone to Kendra without even thinking about it. She felt that for one brief second, not victory, just the small relief of being treated like the obvious person in a situation she had actually been carrying. Then she closed back up again, because one practical question was not the same thing as respect, but it was something. Holly peeled a name tag off the stack and turned all her brightness toward Lauren. "Oh good, you can help but welcome," she said. "You just have such easy energy." Lauren lit right up, hands still resting near Evan like she belonged in the middle of every plan. Holly slid the sign-up sheet her way and started explaining the fundraiser table, the smiles, the check-in flow, all those front-facing little jobs that go to the woman the room already wants to like. Kendra was standing right there. Holly never asked her a thing, didn't even fake forgetting. She just kept talking around her, warm and efficient, like Kendra was the kind of parent best managed from the edges. A couple of parents went quiet. One mom stared down at the name tags instead of meeting anybody's eyes. Kendra didn't correct Holly. Her eyes just hardened. That made it worse somehow. The praise stayed polite. The cut stayed clean. Lauren got the glow of being chosen, and Kendra got treated like the difficult leftover nobody wanted to assign. Amari's stickered water bottle knocked against her leg as she stepped away from Evan and Lauren and went straight to Kendra. She didn't pause, didn't look around first. She just moved. "Mama," she asked, tipping her face up, "where do I wait after they call our class?" Kendra took her hand before she answered, "With me till they say your teacher's name." That was all it took. Amari settled the second Kendra's fingers closed around hers. Her shoulders dropped. The question was handled. She was handled. Lauren stiffened so fast it almost looked painful. Evan watched his daughter like the choice had happened to plainly for him to smooth over. For one quick second, Kendra's face softened. Just for her baby. Then she felt the adults looking and the softness shut back down. Amari stayed where she was anyway, bottle in one hand, Kendra's hand in the other. Like her body had already answered the room before any grown person could explain it away. Holly started asking about dismissal and lineup times, and Evan jumped in quick, like he could grab the moment back. "Yeah, she's with the later release," he said, already pulling out his phone. "I have it right here." He opened his calendar and scrolled once, then again. The smile slipped. "It's at..." He stopped. A parent nearby dropped her eyes to the floor. Lauren's face went shiny and still. Even Holly didn't help him out. Evan looked at the screen another second, then finally lifted his head toward Kendra for the answer he should have known himself. She didn't save him. Kendra just stood there with her hands folded, letting the gap sit in front of everybody for once. The corner of her mouth almost moved. Almost. Then she pressed it flat again. His phone stayed useless in his hand, and now the room had seen it. The confidence came easy. The details did not. The permission forms were still clipped together when Kendra reached across the table and took them back out of that little space between Evan and Lauren. She didn't look at either one of them. She turned to the staffer instead. "These go straight to you, right?" The woman nodded. Kendra placed the clipboard in her hands and let go. It was small. Just school paperwork, just a turning deadline. But she was done being the bridge that made everybody else's arrangement look smooth. Evan's jaw locked. Lauren stayed fixed in that pleasant little stance, like maybe if she held still enough nobody would notice. She had never actually been the one handling any of this. Holly saw it too. Her eyes dropped to the forms, then back to Kendra. Kendra could have explained herself, could have softened it into something polite. She didn't. She let the papers move past them both, straight to staff, and left them standing outside a handoff they had gotten to comfortable assuming. Lauren stepped back in like the fix still belonged to her. She came to close, smile glossy, name tag lanyard swinging against her sweater. Then her hand settled on Evan's arm again. "We're all just trying to make this easy," she said. "For Amari, for everybody." Kendra looked at her for a long second. Flat, tired, done. Her routine was already set. She said, "The confusion is new." The mom nearest them blinked like she'd been splashed with cold water. Evan looked trapped and knew better than to jump in. Lauren kept the smile on. Barely, because that was the problem with Kendra's kind of answer. It didn't sound loud. It sounded factual. Once she said it, Lauren's sweetness had nowhere left to hide. The parent beside Holly lowered her eyes to the pastry in her hand. Evan stayed quiet, and the easy little laugh Lauren had been reaching for never came. Nobody rushed into lighting it for him. Paper coffee cups hung halfway to people's mouths. A couple of parents looked at each other, then looked away. Staff kept straightening flyers and shuffling fundraiser things with that quiet, careful energy people use when they do not want to get dragged into somebody else's awkward moment. The school lobby was still moving, kids, clipboards, coffee, chatter. But around Evan and Lauren, something had thinned out. That easy little laugh people usually gave Evan when he wanted to sound harmless. It never came. Lauren's smile stayed on the lawn, then tightened. Holly looked like she wanted to smooth the whole thing over, but even she seemed unsure where to put her eyes. Kendra noticed the shift and stayed exactly where she was. No extra comment, no satisfaction on her face, no help. She just let the silence sit there until it stopped feeling accidental and started feeling like a room, deciding not to carry his version for him. Evan gave that small laugh of his and looked to the parent beside him like all he needed was one person to help him land it. We're all figuring it out, he said. It's not that serious. He waited. The parent glanced at him, then down at her phone where group text notifications kept lighting up the screen. After a second, she turned her body away and started answering a message instead. No smile, no little right, no rescue, just nothing. It landed harder than an argument would have. Holly caught it immediately. Lauren was still beside Evan, hand frozen around her bag strap. For once, his words were just his words. Nobody was stepping in to translate them into something easier to swallow. Kendra didn't move. Her face stayed flat, but her attention sharpened. Because that was new. People used to help him sound reasonable, used to volunteer their own politeness so he would not have to sit in what he had actually said. This time they left him there by himself. On the way toward the door, Lauren reached for Amari's backpack like it was the most natural thing in the world. Just a handout, easy smile, already moving like she belonged in the pickup chain. Kendra got there first. Her hand closed around the strap before Lauren's fingers could settle on it. I got it. That was all she said. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. Amari shifted in against Kendra's side the second the bag stayed with her. She didn't argue, didn't look confused. She just moved closer to the person who actually handled her things. Lauren pulled her hand back so fast it almost looked embarrassed. Evan stood there with that smaller look on his face, like even he could see how thin all this polished ease was getting. A parent by the door pretended not to stare. Kendra kept the backpack in her hand, firm and calm. Lauren could stand beside him. She could smile beside him. But she was not about to pick up Amari's things and act like performance was the same as care. The metal exit handle was cool in Kendra's palm. She took Amari's hand and moved before anybody could scrape together one more fake easy sentence. Holly looked like she wanted the lobby to settle back into normal. Evan stayed planted. Lauren stayed polished. Both of them were still counting on manners to carry them the rest of the way. Kendra didn't give them that. The dismissal line was already spilling toward the parking lot. Parents were calling children to cars, keys jingling, doors thudding shut. The ordinary school day kept rolling right along, as she stepped into it with Amari at her side like she had somewhere real to be. The hurt had not left her face. It sat there plain as day. But she didn't turn around to smooth the silence she had made. She pushed through the door, let it close behind her, and left the two of them standing in a scene they could not finish without her. The seatbelt clicked across Kendra's chest, her clinic badge tapping against it. Just as Evan bent down to the half-open car window, Amari was already buckled in the back seat with her backpack beside her. "Hey," he said, keeping that easy tone, "can you take her tomorrow too? Just switch with me this once." Kendra kept one hand on the wheel. Tomorrow was already mapped out. Early clinic shift, school drop-off, lunch packed tonight, clothes laid out. Every minute had somewhere to go. He was asking like her time was still the soft place his problems could land. No. He blinked. "Kendra, come on. It's one day." She did not explain the morning math to him, did not list her shift, her timing, her reasons. No. She said again. Then she started the car. A crossing guard looked over. One parent lingering near the curb slowed down. Across the lot, Lauren stood by the SUV pretending to be interested in anything else. Evan stayed bent at the window until Kendra pulled off and left him standing there, with his inconvenience still his. Her phone started skating across the clinic counter in the middle of the lunch rush. Insurance cards piled up beside the keyboard. Copays, names, Date of birth. Kendra kept the line moving while the screen lit again with Evan's name. Then again, then one more time hard enough to make the phone buzz against the laminate. She slid a card through the scanner and turned the phone face down with 2 fingers. A coworker noticed the stack of missed calls and looked at her, then quickly back at the next chart. The patient at the window watched Kendra press her mouth flat, breathe once through her nose, and keep her voice even. You can sign right there. The phone rattled again. Whatever he wanted. It was some basic pickup detail he should have had under control, without reaching into her shift for help. And there she was, standing at her own job, still being treated like the backup system to his day. The hallway between exam rooms was barely wide enough for the people to pass, and Kendra took the call right there with her badge still clipped on, and the pickup app open in her hand. The aftercare coordinator didn't waste time. Lauren was there. Did Kendra want them to release Amari to her? Kendra's answer came fast. No, only Evan. No apology. No explanation about comfort or convenience. Just the rule. The woman on the other end went quiet for a beat, then said, "Okay." Kendra ended the call before anybody could reshape it into something softer. A coworker walking by caught the last piece of her tone and glanced back, not because she was being loud, because she wasn't. That flat finality sounded like a door closing. Kendra stood still with the phone in her hand a second longer. Making the day easier would have been simple. For Amari, that thought tugged. For everybody else, it tugged even harder. She put the phone away and went back to the desk. Lauren stood at the aftercare door smiling through the glass like she had every reason to be there. Inside, kids were dragging backpacks, peeling open snacks, waiting on tired adults to collect them. Lauren gave Amari's name and lifted her hand a little, already ready for the child to come to her. The staff worker checked the sign-out clipboard and tucked it tighter to her chest. "I'm sorry. I can't release her to you." Lauren kept the smile on. "It's fine. I'm with her dad. I still can't release her to you." That made a few parents in line slow down. Not enough to make a scene, enough to watch. The doorway stayed closed, and Amari, quiet behind the staff worker, stayed exactly where she was instead of running forward. Lauren had been carrying herself like proximity was permission at that door, with children watching and the line backed up behind her. A clipboard and one staffer's nose stripped all of that right off. The desk phone rang while Kendra was scanning an insurance card, one hand working the reader, the other lifting the receiver to her ear. Aftercare was on the line, voice tight with closing time stress. Lauren was there. Evan still was not. What did Kendra want them to do with Amari? For one beat, her whole body leaned toward the old habit. Leave work. Go get her. Make sure her child was not the last one sitting under bright lights with a backpack by the wall. She swallowed it. Keep her there until Evan arrives, she said. Do not release her before that. Her coworker looked up at the firmness in her voice. The patient at the window paused with his wallet halfway out, hearing enough to understand who the school had called for the real decision. Kendra set the phone down, took the next card, and kept the line moving. But the truth had already slipped out. When something real went wrong, the system reached for her. When Evan finally got to aftercare, he came up to the window breathing hard. Rush hour traffic had wrung him out. Lauren stood off to the side now, no longer acting like this pickup had anything to do with her. On the counter, a speakerphone sat beside the sign-out tablet while the parents waited in line behind him. With that quiet look people get when somebody else's mess is holding them up. He's here, the coordinator said into the phone. Kendra's voice came back cool and clipped. You see him there in person. The coordinator looked straight at Evan. Yes, a beat passed. Then release Amari to her father. The call ended almost as soon as the words were out. Amari came forward. Evan took her backpack himself. He took her hand too. Lauren didn't touch either one. The line behind him edged up. And for once, there was no easy grin left on him. The library book was sticking out of Amari's backpack pocket. When Evan started talking in that careful, reasonable voice again, they were at Kendra's townhouse for handoff. Amari had one strap over her shoulder, the zipper still crooked, and Evan was halfway through whatever explanation he thought would smooth the day over. When she turned right past him, "Mama, tomorrow library day, where my book go?" she asked Kendra. Not him. Kendra answered without even turning her head Evan's way. "Tomorrow, yes, side pocket, baby, push it down before bed." Evan stopped right there in the middle of his sentence. Out in the car, Lauren had the passenger door open, but she could hear enough to know what had just happened. Even tomorrow morning still lived in Kendra's head. Kendra reached out, tugged the backpack zipper straight, and eased the book down where it belonged. Her face softened for her daughter. Then she let her hand fall, and the softness went with it. The nurse slip was crumpled in Evan's hand when he walked into the clinic, with Amari hanging tired against his shoulder. Kendra was mid-shift behind the counter. Patients were checking in. Phones were ringing. And instead of going through the front like any other parent with a child sent home from school, Evan came straight to her station like her desk was still part of the old marriage. Amari reached for the edge of the counter as soon as she saw her mother. That hit Kendra hard enough to make her grip the keyboard tray. Sick child. Work clock still running. People standing there watching her private life walk into the middle of her job. A coworker noticed he had skipped the line. A patient followed the nurse slip from his hand to Kendra's face and understood enough to stay quiet. Evan lifted the paper a little. They sent her home. Like that was the whole explanation. Like her workplace was supposed to open up and absorb the rest. The intake tablet looked awkward in Evan's hand. The receptionist asked the kind of question every parent should be ready for. Any medications we need listed? Evan nodded first, like the answer was coming. Then nothing came. His mouth open, closed. He glanced down at the tablet, then over at Amari, then finally across the glass to Kendra. The receptionist waited. So did Kendra's coworker. Even the room seemed to hold still for a second. Amari, worn out and flushed from being sent home, watched her mother the same way everybody else did when it was time for a real answer. Evan tried again and got nowhere. What he had was the posture of a capable father. What he needed was the memory work. Kendra felt that old impulse rise up fast. Step in, move it along. Make sure Amari did not have to stand there any longer than necessary. But Evan was still looking at her, waiting for her mind to fill in what his own could not. The intake tablet stayed in Evan's hands. Kendra did not come around the counter. She sat one palm flat beside the clinic keyboard and answered across the glass. Quick and exact. One answer, then the follow-up. Then she looked at Amari and let her voice soften for a single beat. Baby, sit right there for me. That was all. Her hands went right back to work. Another patient was already stepping up. Cards, names, the next person in line. The front desk kept moving even while Evan stood there needing more from her than she was willing to give. The receptionist finished what she needed. Evan had to handle the rest himself. Kendra's coworker noticed it too. She had helped her daughter. She had not stepped out from behind that counter and turned back into his full-time system. Evan lingered like he was waiting for her to come do the rest. She didn't. The nurse came back with the dosing sheet and the school note. Just as Evan shifted closer to catch them, she turned past him anyway. Here, she said, extending both papers across the counter to Kendra. For a second his hand was up and empty. Kendra took the papers because Amari would need them carried through the rest of the day. Medicine timing, pharmacy stop, school for tomorrow. All the little follow-through pieces that never looked like much, until one person was always the one holding them. The receptionist noticed. Her co-worker noticed too. Even the waiting room could read the reflex of it. Nobody asked who would remember the next steps. The room had already answered that question on its own. Evan did not correct the nurse. He did not reach back for the note. He let the papers stay in Kendra's hand because he needed them there. And that quiet little handoff said more than any argument had. His steadiness was still leaning on work nobody had ever wanted to name. The birthday notebook was already open in front of Lauren when Kendra stepped into Diane's dining room. Foil pans crowded the counter. Pot roast steam still hung in the air. Everybody was half out of church clothes, half pretending this was just another Sunday supper. Lauren sat there in soft neutrals with Diane's pen in her hand, right in the seat where Kendra used to keep up with head counts, food, and all the little pieces nobody noticed unless they fell apart. Kendra stopped in the doorway a second along. Diane saw her and smiled anyway. Then she slid the notebook even closer to Lauren. Why don't you keep up with Amari's birthday details? Honey, she said, you have such a sweet way with these things. A couple relatives looked at Kendra and then away. Bernice lowered her eyes. Tasha had just come in behind them, and she froze with one hand still on the back of a chair. Kendra kept moving. For Amari, she took her seat like she had not just watched her place get handed away with a smile. It did not take long for the table to get messy. Somebody forgot who was bringing drinks. Somebody else mixed up the guest count. Diane gave a light little laugh, like confusion was charming, and nudged the notebook toward Kendra on pure old habit. You know how this goes, she said. Kendra looked down at the pen clipped to the cover. Her hand stayed flat on the table. Every part of her knew how easy it would be to pick it up. Fix the list, save dinner from that awkward pause, and let everybody breathe again. Instead, she answered only the one thing that mattered for her child. Amari still needs her allergy-safe treats separate, she said, and a backup outfit. Then she pushed the notebook back toward Lauren. That's all I got. The whole table went still. Lauren's smile tightened around the pen. Evan gave one of those little laughs he used when he wanted a room to pretend nothing had happened. But nobody joined him. The notebook stayed with Lauren. Plates kept moving. Rolls got passed. Silverware clicked against china. Then Diane lifted her voice in that soft church lady way she used when she wanted something to sound gracious and final. I am just thankful for the easy spirit around this table lately, she said, straightening a folded napkin beside Lauren's plate. Lauren has brought such sweetness with her. Things feel lighter. A few people murmured because that was what family dinners trained people to do. Evan let it stand. Lauren lowered her eyes like she was being humble. But she did not move that notebook back either. Bernice stared at her plate. Tasha's whole face hardened, and Kendra felt the sting land so fast it made her eyes burn. She blinked once, locked her face down. She was not about to cry in front of people already halfway ready to call her bitter. Diane kept smiling over a meal Kendra had spent years helping hold together. Talking like peace had just walked in and taken a seat. The scrape of a dining chair cut right across Diane's little speech. Tasha dragged it up beside Kendra and sat down hard, like she was planting a flag, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Diane. Easy for who, she said. Who you think used to keep all this straight? Nobody reached for a roll. Nobody reached for a glass. Lauren dropped her eyes to that notebook in front of her like maybe the lines on the page could save her. Evan opened his mouth, then shut it again when Tasha kept going. Y'all don't get to act brand new now. Diane's smile stayed on her face, but it stopped working. She had to look straight at the resistance sitting at her own table. Even Bernice went quiet in that heavy way that meant she hated where this was going, but knew Tasha wasn't lying. Kendra felt two things at once: relief, because somebody had finally said it; fear, because once Tasha stepped in, this family could turn mean under all that politeness. Still, Tasha stayed right there beside her. Before anybody could answer Tasha, Amari leaned into Kendra and tugged at the neck of her dress. Mama, my tag itching. Where my cream? Small voice. Real problem. Kendra did not have to think. She bent to her toe, unzipped the side pocket, and pulled out the little tube of eczema cream she always carried. When Amari had been in church clothes too long, Lauren watched it come out. Diane did too. Kendra rubbed a little at the back of Amari's neck where the tag had been bothering her. The child let out a breath and folded herself closer into her mother's side, calm settling back into her shoulders almost right away. Nobody else at that table had remembered the cream. Nobody else had packed the tote. Nobody else had even noticed Amari getting fussy until she turned toward the person who already knew what her body was going to need. Kendra capped the tube and slipped it back into her bag, while the notebook stayed open in front of Lauren. At Diane's kitchen counter, Bernice moved fast the way women do when supper is over and everything still needs sorting. Foil pans, leftovers, a plastic grocery bag with candles, wipes, and kid backup things shoved down inside it. She pressed the stack into Kendra's arms before Kendra could even think. Take these, baby, Bernice said softly. Just make sure Amari's day don't turn hard. The weight landed against Kendra's chest on pure reflex. Her hands closed around it because that was what they had always done. Catch it, carry it, keep things moving. Then she looked down. Candles, wipes, extra child stuff, party burden dressed up like motherly help. Bernice kept talking in that low church mother voice, about peace, about the baby, about not letting folks make a mess out of something that was supposed to be nice. Kendra stood there with the pan edges biting into her forearm and the plastic handles digging into her fingers. Shame and anger rising together because her body had taken the load before her mouth had said no. When Kendra came back to the table, the notebook was still open. Nobody had solved anything. She stayed standing this time, one hand on the strap of her tote, the other still marked red where the grocery bag had pressed into her skin. Everybody watched her like they were waiting for the old version of her to sit down and take over. She didn't. I'll bring Amari's cupcakes, she said. Her voice was flat at first. The allergy-safe ones, and I'll bring her change of clothes. That was the pause, the one where anybody listening could hear what wasn't included. That's it. The last part trembled just once before she locked it down. Lauren stayed there with the pen in her hand and the rest of the planning still in front of her. Diane's mouth tightened into a line that was trying hard to pass for a smile. Tasha looked up at Kendra like she had been waiting on that sentence all night. Bernice looked sick with worry. Kendra did not explain it again. She had named her part. The rest could sit where it landed. The speakerphone crackled in the middle of the table. A relative's voice came through bright and ordinary. Not knowing she had walked straight into a fault line. Who's bringing the extra booster seat? And where are y'all keeping Amari's backup clothes? Lauren lifted the phone a little and looked at Evan. Evan looked at the notebook. Then he looked around the table like the answer might be sitting in somebody else's lap. We were just... He started, but he didn't finish it. Lauren gave a thin little laugh and said, "Hold on 1 second," while doing absolutely nothing with that second. And there it was. The old family reflex, eyes turning down the table toward Kendra. Not because anybody had voted on it. Not because she had offered. Just because when something practical came up, everybody knew where the answer usually lived. Diane saw it happen too. Saw the trust slide right past the woman she had just propped up. Kendra felt the answer rise to her tongue out of habit. Booster seat, clothes, placement, easy. She kept her mouth shut and let the silence show who was missing. Then Diane set her hand on the back of Amari's chair. She didn't raise her voice. That made it worse. "Let's not turn this baby's birthday into grown folks' feelings," she said, looking right at Kendra with that calm church face. "The family should not be paying for this because you're upset." The table went tight. Bernice flinched like the words had landed on her too. Tasha started to move, chair legs scratching the floor, but stopped when Kendra didn't. Evan sat there and let his mother carry it. Lauren kept her eyes on the notebook. Diane had taken the silence, the missing answers, the mess everybody had created by leaning on Kendra, and named Kendra the problem instead. Heat shot up Kendra's chest so fast she had to lock her jaw to keep from answering hard. One look at Amari stopped her from blowing the whole room up. She kept her hand still on the table and stared back at Diane. Diane left her hand on Amari's chair like grandmother status had settled the matter. Amari shifted in her seat, tired and overloaded, one foot kicking loose under the table until the strap on her dress shoe twisted crooked. Kendra moved then, not toward the notebook, not toward Diane, straight to her daughter. She knelt beside Amari's chair and fixed the little buckle with careful fingers, smoothed the hem down, tucked a straight curl back where it belonged. "You okay, baby?" she asked. Amari gave a small nod and leaned toward her. Kendra stayed there long enough to settle her breathing, long enough for the child to unclench. Then she stood up and walked right past the open notebook sitting there like a dare. She did not touch it. Nobody missed what that meant. Her care was still there, warm, exact, immediate when it came to Amari. The rest of that room could sit in its own discomfort. Kendra's hand shook a little as she went back to her chair, but she kept them to herself. Behind her, the notebook stayed open and unanswered. By the time people started reaching for coats, Diane had her phone up for a picture. "Come on, let's get one for Amari's birthday," she said, already moving bodies around before anybody agreed. Lauren, she pulled close first, right beside Evan. Then she nudged Amari into the middle of them like the arrangement had always belonged that way. Kendra was still standing off to the side with her toad on her shoulder when Diane looked over and said, "Sweet as icing. We'll get you in after this one. I want one of just the family first." The room heard it. Tasha went rigid so fast it looked painful. Bernice's face felt clean open. Even Amari stalled in the middle of the setup. Caught between adults acting like something ugly was normal. Evan didn't correct it. Lauren stayed where Diane put her. Kendra didn't move. Her face went flat and still, the kind of stillness that takes work. She stood there while Diane held up the phone and arranged her right out of the center. Saturday morning, the phone would not stop. It buzzed against Kendra's kitchen counter beside the cupcake carrier. Lit up, went dark, then lit up again. Diane, Evan, Diane again. Kendra kept working. She pressed the lid down on Amari's allergy-safe cupcakes, taped the label across the top, and zipped the change-clothes bag with the spare tights folded inside. Her phone rattled so hard it inched toward the edge of the counter. She turned it over and kept going. Tasha leaned against the doorway, watching the calls stack up without saying much. She understood what this was. Across the room, Amari sat quiet on the couch with one sock on, studying her mother the way children do when they know something important is happening, and nobody is naming it. Once, Kendra's hand hovered over the phone, just once. Then she pulled it back, checked the cupcake latch, and set the bag by the door. Amari had what she needed. The rest of that panic did not belong in Kendra's kitchen anymore. The knock came while Amari was still half dressed. Her party shoes were by the door. The garment bag leaned against the wall. Kendra opened up just enough to find Evan already wearing that reasonable voice he liked. When he wanted something, "They're behind over there," he said. "Can you please just come now? It would help Amari if we got ahead of it." Kendra kept one hand on the door and didn't touch her keys. "I told you what time we'd be there." He tried again, softer, like father tone and urgency together might reopen an old door. "Kendra, come on. It's her birthday." From the hallway, everything went quiet. Amari had heard enough to stop moving. Tasha stayed within earshot, but she never stepped in. Kendra's grip tightened on the edge of the door so hard her knuckles showed. She hated doing this with Amari listening. Hated it. Still, she said the same time again, no apology, no extra explanation. Then she held the doorway where it was and left Evan standing outside with his emergency, and no way to hand it off. That church fellowship hall looked like a party somebody had assumed would happen by itself. Half the tables were still bare. Balloons had gotten loose and drifted under folding chairs. The sheet cake sat boxed on a side table, and the gift station was only half set, with one empty chair left open at the end like somebody important was supposed to be in it by now. Diane was still in her church clothes, lipstick on, cardigan neat, but she was not presiding. She was working, carrying chairs, yanking open packs of plastic tablecloths, sending relatives back for tape, forks, extra plates. Not there. By the wall, she kept saying, low and clipped. Lauren stood near the dessert table holding ribbon and looking polished in a room that was not ready for her. Evan got dragged into moving tables instead of standing around smiling at people. Nobody was relaxed anymore. Without Kendra there early, the whole celebration had turned back into what it always was underneath all that family talk. Work. When Kendra walked in, she had the cupcake carrier in one hand and Amari's clothing bag in the other. Kids' coats were already draped over chair backs. Juice boxes sweated on the side table. A few neighborhood parents were just coming through with gift bags. Diane looked up like relief had entered the room. Kendra set the cupcakes down, set the clothes bag beside them. Then she took a chair. That was it. She sat where everybody could see her, folded her hands in her lap, and stayed there. Diane made one slow pass nearby, not quite asking yet. Lauren watched from the dessert table with that stiff little smile she used when she wanted something to look easy. Holly noticed right away. So did the relatives. Kendra had shown up. Kendra had brought exactly what she said she would bring. And Kendra was not moving toward balloons, cake, children, clean up, or anybody else's confusion. Sitting there cost her. You could see it in how still she held herself. But she stayed in that chair and let the room feel the difference between presence and access. Right before the cake, Amari knocked over her punch. It ran bright and sticky down the front of her dress, into her tights, onto her shoes. The adults around her froze for a beat too long. Everybody making that useless face people make when they expected somebody else to already have the answer. Kendra was moving before the spill finished dripping. She had the zip bag out of her tote by the time Lauren reached in with a bunch of napkins that were never going to solve this. Holly saw that. So did the mothers closest to the table. "Come on, baby," Kendra said. She took Amari to the restroom, changed her into the clean outfit she had packed, wiped the sugar off her legs, fixed her tights, smoothed her hair back down, and brought her out settled instead of embarrassed. Then Kendra put the wet clothes away, sat back in her chair, and stopped. She had come prepared for her daughter. The rest of that room could fend for itself. By the cake table, Diane saw her opening. The children were already bunching up, inching closer, reaching for frosting before the candles were even lit. Diane slid the candles and the lighter across the table toward Kendra with that soft, church sweet tone she used when she wanted something to sound small. "Can you handle this part?" she asked. "You always know how to keep them back." Kendra didn't touch either thing. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. She didn't stand up, didn't smile, didn't cushion it. "No," she said. That one word just sat there. A couple of parents stopped talking in the middle of their sentence. Lauren's smile tightened so hard it almost disappeared. Evan glanced around the room like maybe somebody else would jump in and make the moment normal again. Nobody moved. The candles stayed where Diane had pushed them. And for the first time, Diane had no graceful way to pretend she still had the right to hand Kendra the center of the whole party. So Evan picked up the ladder. It should have been easy. Light the candles, move the kids back, start the song. That was all. Instead, the children pressed in the second the flame came up. One candle leaned crooked, another went out. Evan laughed like he could smooth confusion with tone alone and kept saying, hold on, while waving little hands back that did not listen to him. Lauren stayed right there at his shoulder, hovering and smiling and not fixing anything. Diane kept tossing in nervous little warnings from the side. The knife wasn't ready. The plates were still stacked wrong. The song tried to start, stopped, then tried again. Amari stood there in the fresh clothes Kendra had packed, waiting for her own birthday moment to settle down. Around the room, people stopped pretending this looked fine. Kendra stayed in her chair and dug her nails into her own palm. Evan clicked the lighter again. The hallway by the refreshment table was quieter than the party room, but not by much. Kids were still shrieking somewhere behind the doors. Bernice caught Kendra by the elbow with a paper napkin crushed down in her fist, and that careful, pleading voice she used when she was scared people were watching the family come apart. Baby, just help a little, she said. People are looking. Don't let this turn into something. Kendra kept hold of her toe strap. She didn't set it down. Didn't move closer, Ma. For Amari, just smooth it out. That hit the sore place. Kendra's eyes filled before she could stop them. Not from weakness, from how familiar this was. I handled what Amari needs, she said. I'm not carrying this room anymore. Bernice went still. From the doorway, Tasha heard enough to know what was happening. She looked ready to step in, then stopped herself. Kendra swallowed, turned away from her mother, and walked back toward her daughter. A few minutes later, Holly stood at the dessert table with 2 cupcake boxes in her hands. Which ones are safe for Amari? She asked. Lauren jumped in first. I think those should be, but Holly wasn't watching Lauren. She was looking straight at Kendra. That landed in the room before anybody said another word. Diane saw it. Evan heard it. Lauren felt it. Kendra didn't get up. She didn't dress the answer up or make it friendly. The box with her name on it. Blue tape. Only those. Holly nodded and took the answer like it was the only one that mattered. Because in that moment it was. She turned with the right box and kept moving. No checking back with Lauren. No asking Evan to confirm. The parents closest to the table followed Holly's lead without hesitation. Lauren was left standing there with her polished smile and nothing useful to do with it. And for the first time, people in that room trusted Kendra out loud. By cleanup, the floor was sticky, wrapping paper had been kicked into corners, and the thank you cards were stacked on top of the little gift notebook Kendra used to take home. Without anybody naming, it is work. Evan caught her near the fellowship hall exit before she could get Amari to the car. He already had the notebook and the card stack held out. Like the handoff made sense all by itself. Can you keep up with this part? He asked, just so we don't lose track. Amari leaned into Kendra's side, tired and done. Kendra looked at the notebook, looked at him. Every birthday and shower and holiday sat in that one small reach of his hand. She took Amari's hand instead. That part is yours now, she said. She never touched the cards, never touched the notebook. Holly saw it. Diane saw it. Lauren saw it. A couple relatives went real busy with folding chairs all of a sudden, but nobody jumped in to make him sound reasonable. Kendra walked out with her toad on her shoulder and left Evan standing there, holding his own follow-up in both hands. The next week, the church fellowship hall had a different kind of noise in it. Folding tables scraping, coffee urns hissing, parents balancing clipboards and bakery boxes before the school community fair even opened. Holly was in the middle of her usual little command circle, volunteer lanyard on, phone in hand, talking fast to the women she normally kept closest. Kendra had barely stepped inside before Holly broke her own pattern. Kendra, come here a sec, she called, opening up the circle with one quick wave. That got attention. Lauren looked over first, smiling a little to hard. Diane noticed too. The chatter in the group dipped because everybody there knew Holly was not usually the one making room for Kendra. Kendra stood in her plain work clothes and flats for one beat too long enough for the sting of only being welcomed when needed to show on her face. Then she stepped forward. Holly held out a spare lanyard and pulled her into the check-in walkthrough, right in front of everybody. Once Kendra was inside the huddle, Holly moved fast, like she could patch the whole awkward situation with good manners and a cute assignment. Perfect, she said, tapping a stack of plastic name tags. Kendra, why don't you and Lauren do the welcome table together? Lauren was already half turned toward her, smiling like the answer had been decided. Kendra didn't pick up a single tag. She looked at Holly. Then at the table. "I'll handle allergy check-in," she said. "And whatever Amari needs." That's it. The little circle went watchful. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't made a scene, but she had refused the exact part they wanted from her most. Not the useful work, the fake ease, the picture of everybody getting along for other people's comfort. Holly blinked and adjusted. Lauren kept that smile on her face, but it had gone thin. Kendra left the name tags where they were. She would help where it mattered. She was not volunteering to soften anybody else's guilt. The labeled snack bins took up half the folding table. Blue dots and green tape slapped across the lids, kid names written in black marker. A teacher hurried into the volunteer cluster with that rushed look people get right before families start pouring through the doors. "I need to know which ones are okay before the kids get in here," she said. "Yelen, Nora, the twins, which boxes?" Holly glanced at the bins. Lauren leaned forward like she might have something to add. She didn't. Nobody did. Not until the whole little circle turned toward Kendra. Kendra drew one small breath, tired already. Then she pointed. "Blue dots for Yelen. Green labels stay on the no peanut side. Red sticker boxes stay closed till the last group." The teacher grabbed exactly what Kendra named and moved. Holly repeated the directions to the parents beside her and shifted the line around them. Without changing a word, Lauren let her hand drop back to her side. No one argued. No one improved on it. The answer had landed, and everybody knew whose answer it was. A little later, Kendra was at the snack table sorting the safe boxes into neat rows while parents hovered nearby, asking about ingredients and stickers and what their kids could touch. One of the mothers who had been at Amari's birthday watched her for a second, then said what had clearly been sitting on her mind. "See, this is what I mean. Kendra is always the one who already thought of what the kids actually need. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be." The women nearby glanced from the sealed cupcake box and the labeled bins over to Lauren, standing at the welcome side of the room, polished and smiling and suddenly very still. The quiet that followed wasn't cruel. It was recognition. A church woman gave a small nod. A mutual friend looked down like she'd been thinking the same thing for a while. Holly didn't rush in to smooth it over. Kendra kept working. She didn't smile. If anything, the praise landed heavy, but it was out there now, playing in public, and nobody could pretend they hadn't heard it. By the coffee urn, Diane tried to catch the moment before it traveled any farther. She had a paper cup in one hand, church cardigan buttoned up neat, voice soft enough to sound kind if you weren't listening close. "Kendra's always been a little particular," she said with a small smile. "Lauren's sweet enough to learn." That was the old kind of line, the one that used to turn disrespect into something polite and manageable. This time it just sat there. One church woman tore open a powdered creamer and poured it into her cup instead of agreeing. A school parent looked down at the cookies. Another woman adjusted her purse strap and said nothing at all. Holly was close enough to rescue it if she wanted to. She didn't. She kept her face neutral and let the silence stretch. Diane stood there holding that paper cup while nobody repeated her version back to her. And for the first time, her gentle explanation sounded like exactly what it was. Cover. When they started lining the kids up for a group photo, Evan and Lauren drifted to the middle the way they always did, smooth and ready, like the room should naturally read them first. Amari stood there for a second with her sticker-covered water bottle in one hand and her little cardigan hanging off the other arm. Then she looked across the hall. Kendra was by the table, still working, not posing. Amari walked right out of the cluster and straight toward her. She didn't ask permission, didn't look back. She came up beside Kendra and pressed the water bottle into her hand. "Hold this," she said, and then handed over the cardigan before tucking herself into Kendra's side. The adults nearby saw it happen. Parents, church women, Holly, everybody. It landed harder than any explanation could have, because it was quick and simple and true. Kendra's whole face softened the second Amari reached her, and nobody stepped in to move that child back where the polished picture had been trying to put her. The line started moving again, and Amari hit that point children hit when they get cold all at once and don't care who sees it. She pulled back, shoulders up, refusing to stay put. Evan tried to keep his voice easy. "Baby, come on." She didn't. Then he looked over at Kendra, in front of the parents waiting, in front of Holly with the roster, in front of Lauren standing there trying to look like she belonged in the moment. He asked, "Where's her cardigan?" Kendra didn't walk over, didn't take the bag from him. She just pointed toward her toe. Front zipper pocket, left side. That was all. Evan bent down and found it exactly where she said. Holly kept her eyes on the paper in her hand. But she was listening. The people in line heard it too. One small question, one exact answer, and suddenly his need for her wasn't private anymore. It was standing right there in the middle of a family line with everybody else. The walkie-talkie knocked against the lead clipboard in Holly's hand, while the line at family check-in bent back toward the fellowship hall doors. Parents were crowding the allergy table. One volunteer had 2 questions at once. Another one was just standing there holding wristbands like she needed permission to breathe. Holly tried to keep control of it with that bright, organized voice of hers. Then she gave up on managing the look of things and turned to Kendra. Can you run family check-in? Start here? She put the walkie and the clipboard right into Kendra's hands. Lauren was close enough to hear every word and still left outside the circle that formed around the handoff. Evan watched. So did the parents waiting in line. Nobody argued. Nobody looked around for who should really be in charge. They just shifted when Kendra lifted her chin and said, allergy families to this side. Everybody else, 2 lines. Safe boxes stay closed. People moved. She clipped the walkie to her waistband, took the clipboard, and the backed-up line started moving under her voice. Lauren saw the shift too. Maybe that was why she reached for the sealed cupcake box. It was the one set aside for the kids who couldn't just grab from the main table. And she moved toward it with that same polished little helpful smile she always used when she wanted access to feel natural. Kendra's hand came down flat over the lid before Lauren could touch it. Leave that closed, she said. Lauren blinked. I was just trying to help. Those are the allergy-safe ones, Kendra said, sharp at first, then steadier. If a parent asks, send them to me. She took her hand off the box only after Lauren's did not move again. Holly didn't jump in to save the moment. She kept the line going Kendra's way. Next family, and that was that. The parents waiting nearby accepted Kendra's correction like it was the obvious call, which made it worse for Lauren than any argument would have. Her smile stayed on, but the box stayed where Kendra left it. The safe cupcake box sat between them, still sealed, while the cluster around the table waited for the moment to pass. Evan gave a little laugh, the one he used when he wanted a room to help him pretend nothing serious had happened. Kendra's just intense about this stuff, he said. Lauren was trying to help. He smiled out at the group like somebody would pick it up from there. Nobody did. A church woman looked down at the folded event program in her hand. One parent cut her eyes toward Lauren and then back to Kendra. Holly kept her focus on the next family in line and repeated Kendra's instructions without softening a single word. Diane stood there with nothing sweet enough to cover it. The silence stretched so long Evan's smile thinned on its own. Kendra felt one sharp sentence rise in her throat. She let it stay there. She didn't need to finish him off. The room had already stopped carrying his version for him. By the exit table, the next volunteer sheet was already out before the last folding chair got stacked. That was how community stuff worked. One event was barely ending before the next one started asking who was going to hold it together. Holly picked up the sheet and looked straight at Kendra. Can you run family check-in again next month? She didn't lower her voice. She didn't make it private. Evan heard it. Lauren heard it. Diane heard it. So did the parents and church women standing close enough to pretend they weren't listening. Nobody acted surprised. A parent near the door gave a small nod like of course. One church woman kept stuffing leftover programs into a box and said, that'd help. No one redirected the ask toward Evan. No one tried to fold Lauren into it just to be nice. Kendra stood there with her toad hanging off one shoulder, tired enough to feel the weight of all the times she'd done this without being named. Still, Holly kept the sheet out toward her, and the room treated the question like it already knew the answer. Cookie trays were down to crumbs, and stacked chairs were starting to scrape along the hall floor. Holly came back with the lead clipboard for next month just as Evan drifted close enough to stand inside the offer if nobody stopped him. We can figure that out. He started. Kendra took the clipboard before he finished. His hand stalled beside it. If there's a question about kids, food, or family check-in, she said, it comes directly to me, not through anybody else. She said it plain. No edge, no cushion either. Holly nodded once. Okay, that was it. A church woman came up right after and asked where the extra wristbands needed to go. She asked Kendra, not Evan. Another parent waited on Kendra to say where the allergy forms belonged. He was still standing there, close enough to hear himself getting left out. Kendra tucked the clipboard against her side and held onto it. More work, yes, but his name wasn't writing on it this time. The coffee by the urn had gone weak, but Diane was still standing there with a paper cup in both hands, like she was just making harmless conversation. Kendra's always been a little particular, she said, lowering her voice for the women gathered near the cookies. You know how she is. It was the same old trimming down. Years of labor, shaved into attitude. Usually somebody would have helped her do it. A quiet laugh, a nod, a soft little, well, yes. This time a churchwoman looked up over her cup and said, particular is why those children got what they needed tonight, and why this whole thing stayed upright. Nobody rushed to smooth that over. Holly didn't. The school parent beside her didn't either. The cluster just went still, then leaned toward the correction instead of Diane's version, a few steps away. Kendra heard every word. She kept her face straight, but it still landed wrong. Being understood this late. Diane's smile tightened over the rim of her cup, and her line went nowhere. Out in the parking lot, trunks were open, foil pans were getting stacked, and half-flat balloons were bumping against car doors in the evening air. Kendra had her tote on one shoulder and gift bags in her hand when Diane caught Bernice near the back of a car. Can you talk to her? Diane asked, low and urgent. For Amari's sake, this doesn't have to be this hard. Bernice was still holding a foil pan. Kendra felt herself brace before she even meant to. She knew that tone, knew the old pattern of being asked to swallow one more thing so everybody else could feel better. Bernice looked from Diane to her daughter. Then she stepped away from Diane and came to stand beside Kendra. She's done enough, Bernice said, soft voice. Final words. Tasha went still a few feet away. Evan heard it and stayed quiet. Nobody in that lot jumped in to make Bernice sound harsher than she was. Bernice kept the foil pan in one hand and started helping Kendra fit the bags into the trunk. With the other, Diane was left holding her own request with nowhere to put it. The pickup curb was a mess of idling cars, swinging backpacks, and parents trying to keep the line moving before the whole thing backed up into the street. Evan caught Holly beside her volunteer clipboard and dropped his voice into that tired, reasonable tone he liked to wear when he wanted sympathy. I'm really trying here, he said. Kendra just makes everything harder than it needs to be. Kendra was only a few steps away waiting for Amari, close enough to hear every word. Her jaw set, but she kept her face still. Holly didn't give him even a polite little rescue. She turned the clipboard past him and looked at Kendra instead. For next month's family night, do you want separate allergy tags at check-in or one list at the front table? That was the answer. Not a nod, not a poor you, just a practical question to the person she trusted. Parents in the line heard it. Nobody picked up Evan's complaint and carried it for him. It just hung there, useless, while Holly waited on Kendra's response. That silence left Evan standing there thinner than he wanted to look. He turned toward Lauren like she could still help hold the picture together. His hand touched her arm, light but asking. She already had her car keys out. I need to head out, she said, to quick, with that fixed smile still pasted on. I've got to get to work. And then she slid free. Her hand came off his arm. She stepped backward out of the little cluster at the curb, gave one tight glance toward the parent line, and kept going toward her car. Nobody called her back. Holly didn't fold her back into the moment. The room had already decided what mattered there, and it wasn't couple polish. Amari's backpack was half open. The tote bags were still on the curb. Evan had to gather all of it himself while parents eased past and pretended not to stare. Kendra watched Lauren leave and felt no real pleasure in it. Just a tired, hard confirmation. Being pretty beside a mess and staying to carry it were never the same thing. Evan ended up there alone, Amari's bags in both hands. By dusk, the porch light at Kendra's townhouse was already on. Her work tote sat just inside the door, through the front window. Tasha's shape moved once and then was still. Kendra opened the storm door halfway and kept her hand on it when she saw Evan standing there. He looked softer than usual, less polished. I know things got messy, he said. I'm sorry, I am, but my mom's upset. People are talking, and if you could just help calm some of this down. There it was, not just regret, a request. Kendra looked at him for a second longer than he liked. Some small part of her had wanted the apology to come clean. It didn't. I'm not fixing what your choices cost you, she said. He drew in a breath. Kendra, that's not what I... Yes, it is. Her voice stayed flat. You don't get to make me the problem and then ask me to clean this up for you. She shut the door before he could reach for anything gentler. Tasha stayed out of it. Evan had to stand there with the no and nobody translating it for him. Host badges were spread across the cafeteria table beside rosters, markers, and a list for bottled water under the hard fluorescent lights. Holly moved down the line calling out jobs like she'd already made up her mind who belonged where. Family check-in Kendra, parent Flo, you and Melissa. Kendra clipped the badge onto her shirt and kept moving. No extra smile, no little speech, just a nod and the badge in place. Then Holly got to Evan. He waited. Holly looked at the sheet and said, "If you want to help, we still need somebody to drop off bottled water before family night." That was all. A spare host badge stayed on the table in front of him, untouched. Nobody argued for him. Nobody tried to make the smaller role sound important. The other parents just kept gathering papers and asking their next questions. Like the assignment made perfect sense. Kendra felt the old reflex rise, that urge to ease the embarrassment for everybody. She let it pass. Evan stayed by the table while she walked off wearing the badge that actually carried the room. After the assignments, people drifted toward the snack table to gather leftover bars and sort donation envelopes. The meeting was basically over, which made the quiet around Evan feel even louder. A mutual friend was stacking receipt slips when she finally looked up. Then she looked at Evan, at Diane, and over to Kendra with her toe still on her shoulder. "Let's be honest," she said. Kendra was the reason any of this ever looked easy. Nobody cutting. She kept going, plain and steady. The kids' schedule, the family stuff, these events, she was the one keeping it from going sideways. Everybody could see that. The donation envelope crackled in her hand before she set it down. No one rushed to soften it for Evan. Holly didn't redirect. The other parents stayed right there with it. Diane's face tightened. But even she had nothing ready to cover her son this time. Kendra said nothing. Hearing the truth come out of somebody else's mouth hit almost harder than the ears. It should have been obvious. She just tightened her hand on the toe strap and let the words stay in the room. By the time the meeting broke up, cafeteria chairs were scraping back and people were stuffing papers into tote bags with one hand and reaching for coats with the other. Kendra already had her practical tote on her shoulder when a school parent stopped Evan and Diane near the doorway. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to if Kendra was the one holding everything together. She asked, why was she always the one made to sound difficult? The question sat there and blocked the whole exit. Diane's mouth parted, then closed. Evan looked like he wanted to smooth it over and keep moving, but nothing easy came out. Holly stayed where she was. The mutual friend did too. No one rushed in with a softer version. No one turned to Kendra like this was hers to explain. She felt the pull to stop, to hear what they'd say, maybe even add one last sentence of her own. She kept walking. The tote dug into her shoulder while that question stayed behind her, right where it belonged. Amari's coat zipper had caught at the neck, and Kendra stopped at the cafeteria exit just long enough to fix it and pull the backpack higher on her daughter's shoulder. Behind her, Evan called her name. Not loud, not angry, just reaching. Kendra's shoulders tightened, but she didn't turn around. She smoothed Amari's coat flat, took one breath, and kept moving toward the door. Inside, parents watched her go. Holly did too. Nobody came after her asking for one more explanation, one more piece of hurt they could use to make sense of the room. Their attention shifted right back to Evan and Diane. Amari stayed close at Kendra's side, quiet and watchful. Kendra pushed through the door and walked into the cooler evening air without looking back. The voices, the fluorescent lights, the whole ugly knot of that room stayed inside with the people who had to answer for it now. Nobody followed her out. Through the glass in the cafeteria door, Kendra's back kept moving away while Evan and Diane stayed rooted under those bright school lights. A parent with her keys looped around her fingers asked it again, only plainer this time. So why was she the one everybody kept calling hard to deal with? Holly did not interrupt. The mutual friend didn't step in either. No nervous laugh. No soft little redirect toward Kendra. No rescue. That was what had changed. The cluster around Evan and Diane just held still. Parents with coats over their arms, volunteer papers bent in their hands. Faces set in that quiet way people get when they've decided not to help a lie anymore. Diane tightened her grip on her papers. Evan wore that strained polite look, but even he could tell the room wasn't going to carry him out of it. Outside, Kendra kept walking. Inside, the question stayed with the people who'd spent the longest time dodging it. The next morning, Kendra was already at the door before Evan knocked. Amari's backpack stood upright between them like it belonged to that doorway. More than either one of them did. Lunchbox clipped on the side. Library book tucked in. A small medication note folded into the front pocket. Kendra handed him the backpack and the routine bag at her feet. Nothing extra. If pickup changes, you tell me directly, she said. If the schedule changes, you tell me directly. Child questions come from you, not through Lauren. Not by showing up here hoping I'll bend. Evan tried on a softer voice. Kendra, we don't have to make every. Directly, she said again. Her hand tightened on the backpack strap before she let it go. Behind her, Tasha stood in the hallway in house shoes and a t-shirt, arms folded, saying nothing at all. She didn't need to. Amari waited by the wall, quiet, watching both of them. Evan looked past Kendra once, like maybe there was a warmer version of this conversation somewhere inside the house. There wasn't. He took the bag and stepped back. He crouched on the porch with the backpack open in front of him and checked it himself. Lunchbox, folder, water bottle, sweater. It was plain work, small work, the kind that used to disappear because Kendra had already done it. Before anybody noticed it needed doing, Kendra stayed upright in the doorway and let him handle it. When he shoved the folder back in at an angle, her mouth open on reflex, she almost corrected him, almost reached down and fixed the bag the quick way. She stopped. Amari watched both of them with those steady, searching eyes children get when they're measuring whether the grown-ups really mean the change they keep talking about. From inside the house, Tasha's face softened a little when Evan didn't ask a single follow-up question. He zipped the backpack, stood up, and carried it to the car himself. Kendra stayed at the door and let that be enough. After his car pulled off, the townhouse got quiet fast. Just the narrow hallway, school shoes by the baseboard, and Amari standing there with her stickered water bottle in both hands. Mama, she said, why were people at school asking Daddy what happened? Kendra had just set her toe down. She bent her knees and got down to Amari's level, close enough to smooth one curl back from her forehead. Baby, you do not have to carry grown folk stories, she said. That's not your job. Amari washed her face before she answered. Kendra swallowed. Her eyes burned anyway. If people have questions about your daddy can answer them. You don't have to explain nothing for us. You worry about school and your snack and being ate. Leave the rest to grown people. From the kitchen, Tasha stayed quiet for once and let Kendra set the tone. Amari leaned in. Kendra pulled her close for one steady second, then held her shoulders and looked at her again until the little girl nodded. Later that week, the school sidewalk was crowded with kids calling for snacks and adults trying to get everybody to the right car before traffic stacked up. Diane came up slower than she used to, both hands around a small gift bag with tissue paper puffed out the top. She stopped a few feet from Kendra instead of sweeping straight in. I brought Amari something, she said. Then she looked at Kendra. May I give it to her? Kendra didn't answer right away. Amari's backpack rested against her leg. Evan stood a little off to the side and, for once, kept quiet. Yes, Kendra said. You may. Diane let out a breath and tried again. And I wanted to ask if you'd be comfortable with me coming to the recital. That word caught hard, but Kendra kept her voice even. You can come, but you ask me, not tell me. You speak to me directly, and nobody makes decisions around Amari and then informs me after. Diane nodded, still holding the bag with both hands. Then she waited for Amari to reach for it. The grocery bag was still open on Kendra's kitchen counter when Bernice came in after working scrubs and nursing shoes. It went straight to the recital snacks. Kendra had already pulled out the crackers Amari could actually eat, the fruit pouch, the wipes, the little sandwich bags. She was reaching for the marker to label them when Bernice touched her wrist. Sit down, baby. Kendra looked up like she wasn't sure she heard her right. Bernice didn't repeat herself. She took the crackers, uncapped the marker, and started filling and labeling the bags herself, neat and steady. One for intermission, one backup, one with the safe snacks only. Then she slid each one into Kendra's tote. Tasha leaned against the doorway, saw what was happening, and didn't make a joke. The kitchen got quiet except for plastic crackling and the soft click of the marker cap. Kendra sat down slow, like she'd forgotten how. Bernice kept working and said, softer this time. I got it. Kendra blinked hard and let her mother mean it with her hands. Paper programs kept bending in people's hands while children in little cardigans cut through the recital lobby looking for their classes. One relative leaned toward Bernice and started whispering, but loud enough to carry. It was Diane's name first, then Evan's. Tasha was already moving before she could open her mouth. Kendra lifted one hand. Just that. Tasha stopped. Kendra looked at the relative and said, "Not in here. Tonight is for Amari." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The relative pressed the folded program flat against her palm and nodded like she'd been caught reaching where she shouldn't. Bernice stayed still and let Kendra handle it. A couple of parents nearby kept their eyes on their own papers, but they were listening. Tasha's arms dropped from across her chest. She stepped back beside Bernice and let Kendra's one sentence settle the whole thing. At the volunteer table, Holly had a seating sheet in one hand and a walkie clipped at her waist. The lobby was moving fast now. Ushers were trying to get families inside before the first song. Little kids were tugging at sweater sleeves, and late parents kept hurrying up with apology already on their faces. Holly pointed straight at Kendra. "If you need anything for child seating, line flow, or late arrivals, ask Kendra. She's running it." Kendra's clinic badge was still clipped to her tote. The volunteer lanyard hung right beside it against her shirt. Nobody argued with the introduction. Nobody acted surprised. An usher asked Kendra where to place a late family with 2 small kids. One parent asked which line moved quicker for siblings. Another volunteer wanted to know who needed aisle seats for easy exits. Every question turned to Kendra first. Lauren stayed at the edge near Evan, polished and silent and not much used to the actual work getting done. Evan didn't step in. He just watched the room organize itself around Kendra, like that was the most normal thing in the world. Kendra answered clean and kept moving, already careful not to let respect turn back into unlimited access. Between the performance and the photo line, the lobby broke open into crumpled programs, kids asking for water, and parents all wanting the next instruction at once. Kendra had the check-in binder braced against her hip when Holly came over with one more thing. "Can you stay after and help with chair breakdown and program cleanup?" Kendra shut the binder. "No, I'm leaving after pictures with Amari." She said it plain and waited. Her body still knew the old pattern. The push back, the little laugh, the part where her limit became a problem everybody else needed her to fix. None of it came. Holly just turned and called to another volunteer to take cleanup. The woman said sure and kept moving. That was it. Evan heard the no land from a few feet away. Lauren stood there with nothing to smooth over, nothing to translate. Kendra let one slow breath out, tucked the binder under her arm, and headed toward the photo line. By the photo backdrop, families were juggling flowers, coats, phones, and tired children who wanted to be done. Evan drifted toward the center with Amari. Lauren moved with him, easy as ever, hand lifting like she meant to slide into the usual spot beside them. Then Amari reached back for Kendra. Her fingers found Kendra's hand without hesitation. The volunteer by the backdrop looked straight at Kendra and waited. Like Kendra was the parent who would say where the child needed to stand. Lauren saw it happen in the same second everybody else did. Her hand stayed half raised, then fell back to her side. She stopped short of the picture space and didn't step in. Evan looked from Amari to Kendra, suddenly unsure of how the shape of the picture was supposed to go. Nobody coaxed Amari elsewhere. Nobody made room for Lauren out of politeness. Kendra stayed where she was, her daughter's hand in hers, and the volunteers started arranging the picture around them. After the photos, the hallway filled with paper flowers, tired kids, and parents gathering up cardigans and water bottles. Kendra had Amari's sweater folded over one arm when Evan came toward her alone. He didn't reach for charm this time. "I need to say this straight," he said. "I made you sound difficult when I was still using what you handled. That wasn't right." The words hit low and deep. For a second, her face almost gave it away. Years of being leaned on and talked around sat there between them. A little ways off, Bernice and Tasha kept Amari occupied on purpose and stayed out of it. Kendra swallowed once, then let sorry look different. She said, "Know your child's routine. Do what you say you're gonna do. Speak to me like a co-parent. Don't come looking for the old access." He stood there with empty hands and no answer ready. Kendra shifted Amari's cardigan higher on her arm and turned back toward her daughter. In the fellowship room after the recital, kids were nibbling cookies off paper napkins while adults balanced paper plates and tried to decide whether the night was over yet. Diane crossed the room with a plate she hadn't touched and stopped in front of Kendra's table. She didn't speak to the room. She spoke to Kendra. You kept this family steady for years, she said. I should not have treated that like it could be handed to somebody else. Nobody interrupted. Bernice went still with a napkin in her hand. Tasha stayed quiet. Evan heard it. Lauren heard it too. There was an empty chair near Diane. Like maybe truth was supposed to bring Kendra back into some softer arrangement. Kendra stayed seated beside Amari. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. She let that happen and did not rush to make Diane feel better for finally saying what should have been said long ago. After a moment, Kendra gave one small nod. I heard you, she said. The plate in Diane's hands lowered, and the room had to sit with the words as they were. At dusk, the fellowship hall doors closed behind them one by one, and Kendra walked to her car with Amari's hand tucked in hers. Bernice carried the recital flowers for a second until Kendra opened the back door, then handed them over so they could rest on the floorboard beside Amari's shoes. Kendra set her bag on the passenger seat. Her clinic badge was still clipped to it. Swinging a little from the motion, her phone lit up with something that did not matter tonight. She silenced it without even reading the whole screen. Tasha stayed nearby without crowding her. Bernice stayed nearby without telling her what forgiveness was supposed to look like. At the doorway, Evan and Diane stood with Lauren, all three of them still by the entrance. Kendra buckled Amari in, shut the door, and got behind the wheel. She started the car and pulled out without looking back. By the time she reached the end of the lot, the tightness had eased out of her face. This story stayed with me because it first came to me in a mail from somebody who said the hardest part wasn't being left, it was being treated like background by people who still needed her. What keeps sitting with me is how respect only started showing up once Kendra stopped cushioning everybody else's life, not through some big speech, just in who the room trusted when something real came up. If you've ever been the one holding it together while getting called difficult, tell me in the comments. And if another story like this is sitting heavy on you, send it my way.